What the heck are these? So for the most part, Pokemon is exclusive to Nintendo consoles. There's the occasional mobile release like Shuffle, which was also on the 3DS, and Masters, which is just on mobile, but these are the outliers. However, back when PC games got physical releases, there were a few officially licensed Pokemon games that got made, games that you may not even know about. And I'm not referring to like Flash games on the Pokemon website. These are physical PC games that got printed on discs that you can go on eBay right now and buy. For the most part, we'll go over the exceptions when we get to them. But for now, let's actually take a look at these games and see what they're all about. Let's start with the PokeROM series, what I showed at the very start of the video. These are a series of edutainment games by the Learning Company, and these are possibly the games in this video that fascinate me the most. When you boot up the game, the narrator of the Pokemon anime asks you to install the
Pokemon Sanctuary,
which we'll get back to in a moment. And after making a user and selecting a school grade, you get brought into a game of concentration. You have to match numbers and arithmetic expressions. Clearing the board means you've freed the Pokemon that's on the PokeROM. You can print a picture of it, see some screenshots of it from the anime, or go to the Pokemon Sanctuary to see it in its natural habitat, which just appear to be the same screenshots we could see before. Yes, in the Pokemon Sanctuary, you can view the Pokemon that you freed from playing that game of concentration, along with any other Pokemon you freed from any of the other PokeROMs. See, the content of all of these PokeROMs are the exact same. The only difference is the Pokemon that you free after playing the game of concentration. There were 51 of these things, and the only difference between any of them is the single Pokemon that's on the disc. Now, once you've freed a Pokemon, you're able to view it at any time in the Pokemon Sanctuary. You don't need to insert the Bulbasaur PokeROM to view Bulbasaur in its natural habitat. But going back to the Pokemon Sanctuary for a moment, there's one more thing we can do here. We can go to the Trainer Center to challenge a friend to a trainer race, where we answer some Pokemon-related questions, along with questions about math, English, science, the type of stuff you might encounter in elementary school. They even have the voice of Professor Oak at the time, Stuart Zagnut, read out all these questions. Towards the end of the game, you reach the Lightning Round, where you have to press a specific key on the keyboard to buzz in when the correct answer is shown. Before we move on to the next game, I want to take a moment to go over this. I mentioned there are 51 different PokeROMs that got released, and they were all released over 3 different series. There's the Premier Series, the Movie Series, and then the Mystery Series. That last one being the rarest because the Learning Company kind of stopped existing shortly after the Mystery Series released. And it might be because of this that the Mystery Series, at least, was actually considered lost media until recently. On the Lost Media Wiki, the last of the Mystery PokeROMs were only backed up in March of this year, 2023. And again, this is the series that had the most discs, and it's this rare. There are 10 PokeROMs in the Premier Series, plus a sampler that contained Mew, 10 PokeROMs in the Movie Series, and 30 in the Mystery Series. Despite containing the most PokeROMs, I actually couldn't find anything from the Mystery Series on eBay, only Premier and Movie. So I bought this lot of PokeROMs from someone on eBay. These 2 are from the Premier Series, and these 4 are from the Movie Series. One thing you might notice is that these discs don't look like your typical CD-ROM. This type of disc is sometimes referred to as a bootable business card. Obviously, the sides of the disc are cut off here. If you look at a Wii game, for example, the disc here is bigger than the PokeROM's disc, so these are actually kinda tiny. And I mentioned this before, but I want to stress, despite there being different series of releases of these PokeROMs, the gameplay of all of them are just copy and pasted. The only difference is the single Pokemon that you set free. Now, this isn't the only Pokemon thing the Learning Company put out. They also released Pokemon Project Studio Red version. Wait, Red version? Does that mean there's a... son of a... Yeah, there's two versions of this, and each version has nearly 70 Pokemon exclusive to it. Having 51 versions of PokeROM is way worse, don't get me wrong, but this is also pretty stupid, especially because Pokemon Project Studio is image editing software. Like, the main series doesn't need two versions of each of their games, but this really doesn't need two versions. Now, to give Project Studio a bit of credit, it's not just something like Microsoft Paint. There are quite a few types of projects to choose from, in addition to a blank canvas, and each project has pre-made templates that you can choose from. Unfortunately, I can't get this running on my computer, but from what I can see, this looks like the kind of thing I would have enjoyed as a kid. There are multiple prints for each of the original 151 Pokemon, plus things like characters from the anime and additional graphics like borders. And if you have both versions installed on your computer, you get access to all of the Pokemon in one executable file. You don't need to do anything dumb like save your project in red version and then open it up in blue version. That's all that the Learning Company had a hand in, but there are still plenty more games to go over. I only have one more game that I own and can show off on camera, and it's an interesting one to say the least. So this is the Leafeon vs Metagross Expert Deck, and included in this package is a CD-ROM that would allow access to Pokemon Card Game Online, a Japanese-only flash game that you could play in your browser. This was a bit of a precursor to Pokemon Trading Card Game Online, which was recently succeeded by Pokemon Trading Card Game Live, because like those games, you could battle against other human players in Card Game Online. Yeah, this game had online multiplayer, what a surprise. It was only up for 9 months, however, and there were only 6 pre-constructed decks that players could choose, with no way to get any new cards or build any different decks. Now, the thing is, in this package is a card with a code printed on it, and you'd have to use that code to actually be able to play Pokemon Card Game Online. Now, despite the main appeal of this being Pokemon Card Game Online, there is some offline content that we can still access. I can't navigate Japanese very well, but from what I can tell, all that's on the disc is a single opponent you can face off against with one of 2 pre-built decks. I believe these are also 2 of the decks that you can use in Pokemon Card Game Online, so in a sense, this is like an offline demo for that. There are a few other options I can click when I put the disc in, but they either didn't work or brought me to a webpage that's no longer online. One did create a shortcut to the aforementioned offline webpage though, so that's good. Back when this game had online play, there were tournaments held occasionally, and according to Bulbapedia, one of these tournaments was a way for people to be able to attend the Last Chance qualifier event for 2010 Worlds, which I think is pretty neat, honestly. Before we move on, I gotta ask, why Leafeon and Metagross? By themselves, they're popular Pokemon. Metagross is a pseudo-legendary and Leafeon is an evolution, but I guess since the title included verses, I would have expected the 2 Pokemon to inherently have more of a rivalry, or at least be similar, or something. Like if this was Salamence versus Metagross, okay, those are both pseudo-legendaries introduced in Gen 3, that I'd understand. This, it just seems like they kind of picked 2 random, somewhat popular Pokemon. But maybe in the context of the TCG and the meta at the time, this makes sense. I don't know. If you have any insight, please, let me know in the comments. Okay, now that that spiel is out of the way, there's one more game involving Pokemon TCG that we gotta go over, and that's Pokemon Play It! Developed by Fluid Entertainment and published by Wizards of the Coast, there's actually 2 versions of this, but I can't get the original version to work, so we're just gonna talk about version 2. I think Pokemon Play It is fairly well known, if only because of this amazing, high-quality opening cinematic, but this is a physical disc, so let's take a moment to go over it. Once you get to the menu, you can, of course, play the trading card game. You can also use a deck builder, although you can't use any of the decks you build in-game, which is really lame. And there's also a checklist for keeping track of what cards you have in real life and which ones you need. Getting into the meat and potatoes of the game, there are 15 levels, but 11 of them are tutorials. The basic challenge and advanced challenge stages are the only ones that let you use full 60-card decks in unscripted battles. While you can't build your own decks in this game, you do have 7 different pre-built decks to choose from for use in the advanced challenge at least. The tutorial levels are at least nice for teaching you how to play the game, although Julie, the character teaching you how to play, talks a bit too much and is a little too obnoxious in my opinion. I get this is a game targeted towards kids, and so you want to make sure they understand stuff, but still. Next up, let's talk about Pokemon Masters Arena. This one was published by ValueSoft and developed by Imagine Engine, and is a collection of 8 minigames. Unfortunately, I couldn't get this game or the next one working on my computer, but taking a look at Masters Arena, this seems like the kind of game that I would have played for like an hour at most as a kid. There's just no depth to these minigames, outside of getting a printable poster for mastering each of them. Mastering just means you got to a certain level of the game, and I guarantee you I would have never bothered to master each of the games, as one of them is Mahjong Solitaire. I never liked Mahjong Solitaire as a kid, and even now I don't really understand it and would rather play something else. Imagine Engine and ValueSoft teamed up for another release, Pokemon Team Turbo. This one's a racing game that also features a few mini-games, and playing the mini-games gets you power-ups for the racing part of the game. Interestingly, each mini-game provides a power-up that can only be used on a specific race course. So if you're stuck on one course in particular, you have to play the one mini-game that awards the power-up that can be used there. I shouldn't have high hopes after Masters Arena, but this just seems like a weird design choice. It means if there's a particular minigame you don't like, but if it gives you the power-up for the course you're stuck on, then too bad. But the main part of the game is the racing, and it looks fine enough. Like, a kid would probably enjoy this, but I imagine very few adults, if any, would get any enjoyment out of this, other than maybe for a couple of minutes if they have nostalgia for this game. There are a decent number of Pokemon to race with, but as far as I know, they don't have any different stats or anything. Which Pokemon you play as is purely aesthetical. The next 3 are part of a bizarre collaboration. As a part of Pokemon's 10th anniversary, a total of 3 games were included in packages of Perdue Chicken Breast Nuggets. These games were Pokemon Pokeball Launcher, Pokemon Seek and Find, and Pokemon Team Rocket Blastoff, and they all have some similarities with each other. Their title screens all share this format and have the same options. Play the game, check the Pokédex, view some tutorials for the Pokemon TCG, and go online. If we try to go online, the webpage it tries to bring us to no longer exists, so that's pointless. The TCG tutorials are just video files, there's no interactivity. There is a quiz, which I assume you actually would be able to interact with, but that's it really. I feel like Pokemon Play It would be a better teaching tool because you actually get to play the trading card game. Anyway, as for the Pokédex, I saved it for last, other than the games themselves, because I want to complain about it. So off to the side, we see there are bars that show off how high a particular stat is for a Pokemon. This is fine, but the problem is that Bulbasaur has the exact same special attack and special defense. Kingdra's attack, defense, special attack, and special defense are the exact same. Slacking's base HP is 150, while its base special defense is only 65, but I guess that's close enough for the bars to be the exact same length. Why is Regice's defense as much as its special defense? Its base special defense is double its base defense. Wait, Slacking's base special defense is 65? That's the same as Bulbasaur! Why are the bars at different lengths? Even special attack, which is also 65, has a shorter bar. I just enjoy how this is a licensed Pokemon game that provides such vague, inconsistent, and arguably false information about the stats of Pokemon. Hell, there are some Pokemon they don't even provide stat info for. It's mostly just mythical Pokemon, although Lugia is also in this bunch, oddly enough. Anyway, on to the games themselves. Let's start with Team Rocket Blast-Off. This is a mini-game where you have to catch the Pokemon that Team Rocket are throwing out of their hot air balloon. They also throw out sandbags, however, and you gotta avoid catching those, or else you lose points. You also lose points by letting a Pokemon fall to the ground. Get enough points before the time runs out, and you win! That's all there is to this game. Okay, to be fair, if you win on the highest difficulty setting, which honestly gets kind of unfair at points because the Pokemon are seemingly tossed out randomly, making it possible for you to be completely unable to get to a Pokemon, then you get to see the Pokemon 10th Anniversary music video. This is just the same song that plays on the title screen, but now with shots from the anime spliced in. Well, that wasn't worth it. Maybe Pokeball Launcher will be better. This is a game where you have to throw Pokeballs at Pokemon to catch them. However, on the higher difficulty levels, you can only catch the same Pokemon a certain number of times. On the hardest difficulty in particular, you can only catch each Pokemon once, and since there's zero way to see what Pokemon you've already caught, you just have to remember the 10-15 Pokemon you've caught once you get towards the end of the game. Also, you can't really miss any of your throws on this difficulty level. This was so hard, I didn't even bother completing it. Pokemon Seek and Find is probably the best of the trio, but it might be better to say it was the least bad. In this game, you're given a silhouette and a written clue, and you have to find that Pokemon amidst a pile of them. The fun thing is that these Pokemon are scaled to their actual size, so if you have to find a large Pokemon like Groudon or Kyogre, these were on the hardest difficulty level. And just like with the other two games, if you complete the game on the hardest difficulty, you get a prize! Oh, this is just the same music video from Team Rocket Blast-Off. I never completed the hardest difficulty on Pokeball Launcher, but I think it's safe to assume this was the prize waiting for me there. Now that you've seen these games, if for some reason you want to grab the discs these games are on, good luck with that! According to Bulbapedia, only 1 million of these were made, and as I mentioned earlier, they were in packages of chicken nuggets. Considering meat products typically have a pretty short shelf life, it's entirely possible that not all of these discs were bought by consumers, and even if they were, who's to say all of them kept the discs and didn't throw them in the trash or something? I tried looking on eBay for these games a few times, and I never found anyone selling any of them. So if you ever find one for sale, consider yourself extremely lucky. So when I started making this video, I just wanted to stick to talking about PC Pokemon games that had physical releases. But while I was doing my research, I learned about 2 download-only Pokemon PC games that I just had to talk about. The first is Pokemon PC Master, not to be confused with Pokemon Master Arena or Pokemon Masters EX. Do you think the Pokemon Company knows they have 3 games with Pokemon and Master in their title? Anyway, Pokemon PC Master is an edutainment game made by Umbrella, the devs of the Pokemon Rumble series and a few other spin-offs like Hey You Pikachu and Pokemon Dash. Pokemon PC Master was designed to teach children how to operate a computer, but unfortunately, the game is considered lost media as of right now. It was only ever released in Japan, and it was apparently tied to a subscription. No more subscription, no more access to the game. There is a trial version out there, but I couldn't get it working on my computer, so unfortunately, I couldn't check it out. If I ever do get it working though, maybe I'll make a video showing it off. This game honestly kind of fascinates me. The final game we're going to talk about today is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Gold Rescue Team. Only ever released in South Korea, this is a PC version of Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team. Well, kind of. It's just a demo, but you're able to go through a decent chunk of the game. You can play up to meeting Xatu, which is shortly before the refugee arc of the game begins. This is another game that's lost media, although, even if it's found, that doesn't mean it'll be playable. See, the game required a connection to a server in order to actually play it, even though it's just a single-player game. I think it's pretty safe to assume that server is offline now, meaning you won't be able to connect to it, meaning you won't be able to play the game. Still, If the game was ever found, maybe someone could find a way to bypass that server connection, and maybe the game would be playable again. Who knows? I hope we get there someday, cause this is honestly a really neat part of Pokemon history. You wouldn't expect a Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game to be legally playable on a computer, but one exists out there. It's a shame it's currently lost to time, though. There are honestly way more Pokemon games on PC than I thought there'd be. When I started looking into this subject, I thought there'd be maybe 3 or 4, and they'd just be TCG simulators. But I was surprised to learn just how many there were, and the wide variety of quality these games have. Like, don't get me wrong, most of these are okay at best, but Project Studio honestly looked really neat for a creative child, and it's kind of mind-boggling to think that Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is technically also on PC. Like, that's probably the closest we're gonna get to having a high-quality, non-free-to-play spin-off on something other than a Nintendo console. Again, this was avoiding games that are just playable in your browser, so I didn't cover everything on PC, but I wanted to stick to these because I felt they were the most interesting. Did you learn something new? Did any of these games fascinate you? Please, let me know in the comments, and take a look at one of these videos on screen if you want to learn some more neat stuff about Pokemon. In the meantime, please be sure to give the video a like, make sure you're subscribed, and thank you so much for watching, everyone. An extra special thanks to Mithril Monarch and the rest of my patrons on screen here for going the extra mile and financially supporting the channel. See you next time, everyone.